Welcome to listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan, a podcast about the art and hobby of miniature painting. I'm Mike, and thank you so much for joining us on our continued quest to become better, braver, happier painters. Not much fluff ahead of the interview today. As promised, this is more content from ReaperCon, and today we bring you an interview with Anthony Rodriguez, also known as Pirate Monkey Painting. So without further ado, Anthony Rodriguez. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, man, thank you very much for having me.
And it's awesome because to have you on, we talked a little bit about beforehand, but some of the first videos I watched when I got back into the hobby were your videos.
Yeah.
And they're just such an amazing teaching tool. Thank you for producing those.
Yeah, thank you for watching them. Like the reason why I made those videos, at least initially, was like there wasn't quite the content like that when I was first getting back into painting. So I was like, I want to make this video like for Anthony 3 years ago. And I was like, I felt comfortable doing that because I was like, I feel like this will help people. And, a lot of my intention with those videos and the ones that I'm producing now, because those ones are, I lost that whole YouTube channel.
Oh, wow.
So I've had to remake them. But even that was an opportunity to be like, okay, cool, we can make this better. Like, we can help people better. And so that's one of the underlying ethos for me is how do I improve myself as a person and an artist? But then it's not about me at the same time. It's how can we also pass this on and give other people a great foundation so that they can take their thoughts and their imagination and dreams and translate it to the projects that they want to complete. So
that's awesome. That's such a gregarious way of putting it out there that it's thinking about who's watching it and such. So that's awesome to hear an artist talk that way. For our listeners' sake, can you give us a little bit of your hobby origin story, how you got started out in this crazy thing we call mini painting?
I know, right? Yeah, it is. It's almost like a niche within a niche in some ways, but yeah, it's it's a long story because I had a period when I was a teenager. I want to say about a year and a half when I was 14 into 15. That's where I first dipped my toe into it, and then in my early 20s, I got back into it, and I'll kind of give both stories because they, I think you kind of need both. But so when I was young, my mother was sick, and we were in Pennsylvania, and I'm not from Pennsylvania. We were just kind of traveling in the area, and that's just what was going on. And my dad took us to the King of Prussia Mall.
Okay.
And they had a game store in there at a time. My brother saw the Battle for McCrag, Warhammer 40K box set.
Oh, God, yeah.
And he was like, this looks awesome. He showed it to me, and I was like, this looks awesome. And I was like, huge, we were both in Halo, so we love sci-fi, and, big guys in mech suit kind of thing.
Absolutely.
This was whole teams of them.
Right.
This,
Robot Wars, man. It's
exactly.
awesome.
And so, we got it only to find out, you have to put these together, and, they're just going to be gray plastic if you don't paint them. And so, my brother ended up enjoying the game aspect much more. I ended up, being I'll give it a go. I'll give painting a go. And got some cheap acrylics and tried it and kind of stuck with it.
Right. So you're talking craft store acrylic type paints? Perfect, yeah.
I mean, they weren't anything fancy. We might have ended up at a game store with a couple of GW pots. That in that era was those paints were the best. I still have some actually. And so and then I got into White Dwarf and saw the level of painting at the time, and that's when some of these really great guys were really starting to hit their stride.
Yes.
And so I was exposed to people like Banshee and Volomir, and a lot of the guys from the French school like Jeremy Bonamont, and a lot of the great American painters too. Very early on, I was like, I want to do that. This is it brought me into that world.
Right.
And I did that for a while. I went to a games day, was best runner-up in Youngbloods.
Oh, that's awesome.
I can't remember what year. Man, it's been so. I think it was 2006 or something. They didn't take pictures of it or anything, but it was me in bronze, and I was like, oh, But, anyway, so then of course
a little bit to whet your appetite, right?
Exactly,
you got a little bit of success, you got more coming.
Right. And so we ended up moving from Michigan, where we were living, to Missouri, and. I don't know what, I think it was a part of the move and just kind of where I was emotionally girls were starting to look cute.
Right.
My interest was kind of shifting because you're a teenager and it can be hard to stay focused if you don't have people helping or hurting, guiding you in a way. And I didn't. And so I got into living art. Like I got into bonsai, and then I got into reef aquariums, which is kind of a living art as well. And yeah, then life happened and time went on, and we're jumping ahead now to 2013.
Right.
I'm living with my then girlfriend, and I find out that like they play D&D, but they don't play D&D like role play D&D. They play like Diablo, where they're just getting into a dungeon and like hacking and slashing and having fun. Right? And she was like, "Hey, like I know you used to paint these things. Like, want to get this a go? Because like we need more demons to kill, kind of thing." And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And like she had no idea what she was getting me into.
So you can say it's her fault.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh yeah. She asked me. Yeah. That relationship is, it didn't work out. But,
sure.
It was definitely something where I was like, oh man, this is as fun as I remember. And I had like big kid money.
Right.
I had a fairly decent amount of time between like school and work. And yeah, I mean, and then of course the relationship wasn't working out. So I had more time for it.
Right.
And so by, I want to say 2014, I had gone to my first ReaperCon, and I had like really seen the level.
Right.
Met a good few of the European guys, because I was following their tutorials, and was very passionate about the hobby. And then 2015 was kind of the same thing, but the relationship ended like halfway through that year.
Oh, okay.
And so I had all these European guys going like, "Hey man, when you coming? When you coming to Europe? When you coming? When you coming?" And I was like, early on, I was like, "Oh man, I'd love to, but I don't know when." And then when the relationship ended, I was like, "All right, I've got nothing better to do."
Right.
This is kind of a time for like a refresh, or like kind of maybe a change of priorities in my life. And
right.
So I really started getting really serious about my art.
Okay.
Really started doing studies. I think that on average per day, I was maybe doing between like 8 to 10 hours of between painting miniatures and like more fine art studies.
Right.
Probably for almost like a year.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really grinding. Like I was going hard.
That's something else, man.
And at the same time, I was saving money for this European trip. Like I was doing stuff like turning down the heater in winter, like turning down the AC, in summer. And it ended up working out to my benefit. And I'll kind of explain later on. So then I went on my grand European trip. And that was like almost a full year. I think it was 9-ish plus months total.
Yeah.
That was incredible. Like by the time I got home, I was like rubbing pennies together.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very fortunate to be able to stay with a lot of people that invited me from the miniatures community. Like I wouldn't have been able to do that trip without the miniatures community.
Right.
Then I try to pass that on as much as I can.
Right.
Through these con seasons, I'll have people be like, "Hey man, can I come stay and hang out and paint?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, "Yeah, come on, we got a guest room."
Right.
So I try to pass that generosity on. And yeah, when I got back from Europe, I went professional. Where I was like painting miniatures. I'm going to try to make my income. And that worked out very well, really, until 2020, when the pandemic hit. And there was just enough instability. Mm-hmm. And, I'm married by then, had a child. And so when you have bills, it was different. So I had to kind of shift out of it.
Yeah.
I was emotionally exhausted because I had been pushing for 6-7 years hard. And so I took a bit of a break. Mm-hmm. Really until this ReaperCon. I had continued teaching my students and stuff, but I really had to pick up a brush in about a year. Mm. And now looking back at the decision, I think that was the best decision I could have made. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited about it again. Like, I don't think I'd be as excited about it if my relationship hadn't shifted away a bit from the commissions that I was relying on, and now I can paint the things that I want. I can paint creative projects. I have the funding to maybe hire a sculptor, kind of thing, and just really do big projects like I would love to. So, and yeah, that's where I'm. That's the whole story to now.
Well,
maybe a bit more than you were asking for, but
no. You know what? I think one of the goals of the podcast is to let people know that no matter how amazing artists that we've had on this show, that everybody goes through the same things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the
Yeah,
fact
yeah.
that, you're here, I went pro, but then I needed a break. And that the break was the best thing for you. And that's just amazing to hear because, it's so... I took a 25-plus year break myself. I started in high school, did a little in college, and then my son found my stuff years and years later. And I went, ooh, look at
so
this.
Cool. Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I went to the Nova Open, didn't know what to expect. I took a blending class from CK Studios, Caleb and Kat, and I was kind of hooked on it.
Yeah.
And then they said to me, go look at the display for Roman stuff. And I went, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Right, this is...
Roman's amazing.
Well,
he's one of the guys that I stayed with on the trip.
Oh, man, I'm so jealous because he is just, he's one of my favorite painters.
He's
but
amazing. Such a kind guy, too.
Yes.
So
huge
gentle,
heart. Yeah, huge heart. Amazing teacher.
Yes.
Patient. He had me in a 3-day workshop and didn't kill me, which is surprising because I want to kill me after a 3-day workshop. But
I mean, he works you guys, too.
He to the bone. And it was
he
well
wants
worth
to make
it.
sure you're getting what you paid for, yeah.
Absolutely, but and just like hearing about the kindness of the community, staying at places, and seeing that more and more. Like I know Eric is teaching a class in Northern Virginia, and he's crashing on a buddy's couch who's coming to the class as well, and that's great because that saves him. That means more profit for him from the class, which helps him move on and stuff. Keep it going. So
exactly.
It's just amazing, man.
I like it. It is one of the, and of course this is a generalization, but as a community it is very holistic. Like, we're at ReaperCon. Like, I can leave my stuff on my desk all day and not worry about anything getting lifted. Like, if it does happen, it's very insular or it's very uncommon, right?
Right.
I can leave my artwork over there and not worry about people picking it up, or taking off with it, right? And I think that there's a lot of respect and warmth and generosity through the community. I think in part because we all kind of have this shared love of not just painting miniatures. I think in gaming and games, but I think we're all kind of maybe in the same place like earlier on in life, and we don't want anybody to feel like that.
Right.
Because it's not fun to be the person that's like shunned or isolated because you're enthusiastic about something that maybe not as many other people are. So at least I think at least in the States that's kind of the feeling. But it's great. It's amazing. I love it. I fall in love with it every time I come to one of these shows too.
And this is crazy too. If you look at how many people are actually their setups, they're painting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I've been to the Nova Open. You don't see this.
No,
and
you
I love
don't.
the Nova Open.
Yeah,
so if Nova Open people listen to this, that's not what I'm saying. This is a very different feel.
It is. I think that ReaperCon in particular, people really make time. Like most people think of it as like a family reunion in a way. And there's just so many people. They just come and hang out and paint. Like Adepticon has a really cool vibe too around Fort Waffle. Usually there's Fort Waffle at ReaperCon.
Right.
Unfortunately, they couldn't make it. And so you have a bunch of people hanging out and painting, but not at this scope. Like this is like magnitudes more, which is fantastic. You love seeing it as a painter and a miniature enthusiast, and an RPG enthusiast, all those things.
And I'm enamored with the artist alley.
Yeah.
Because you can just go from like amazing to amazing to amazing to amazing, and every single artist wants to talk to you. They want to show their stuff. It's a wonderful thing.
It is really cool.
Let me ask you this: so with that European tour, who else did you learn from?
Oh man! So I want to preface this with I was rubbing pennies together so much. I was never actually able to take a formalized class from anybody.
Oh, okay.
Because I couldn't pay anybody. I was like, I front loaded that. Like we could use the trip with Roman. Like, hey man, I would love to take a class with you, but I don't want to disrespect you and not be able to pay you for your time, which I think is very valuable.
Yeah.
Do you maybe have time, for a weekend for me to come and just hang out with you for a couple days in your studio? Like, I won't bother you. I'll just be kind of a fly on the wall. And 9 times out of 10, they'd be like, "Come crash on my couch. You can stay for a couple days."
Right.
Just like sleeping with Roman, it was like, "You can sleep in my studio."
Right.
Or at my home studio.
Right.
And it's flat. And I was like, "Are you sure?"
Right.
Like, I don't want to. I'm not trying to put you out. And they'd be like, "Yeah, come on." And he'd come and grab me at the train station, and I had my bike, so like we just rode our bikes over to his flat.
Oh, nice.
Over to his studio, and I fell asleep in his home studio with his one of his display things, just kind of like, oh my God, it's right there.
Osmosis.
Yeah.
Osmosis,
Yeah.
please.
But yeah, inevitably you end up having those conversations, and this is why I love the artist alley, or what I was going to talk about with the artist alley was that and one of the bits of feedback I gave my friend Dan that I'm here with is like, man, if you wanna get a one-on-one time with Eric, just be like, hey man, can I buy you dinner on Friday?
Right.
There you go. You got yourself like 2 hours at least, and more than likely, and all of us are just kind of painters, right? So we're all people. Like we're not like superstars or anything. But anyways, so
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
You wanted me to kind of give you a list of people.
You don't have to. I don't. I want to put you on the spot with
I
that.
don't mind. And again, I'm very humbled. I just don't want to come across as like a haughty, like, well, I got to stay with
No.
so and so.
Honestly, all you're going to get is jealousy from us.
Yeah.
We're not going to look at you negatively. We're going to be like,
Right.
damn, you're lucky.
And again, I'm very lucky and fortunate that these people kind of were kind enough to do this with me. So, let's see. In England, for a long while there, I stayed with Jack Crow. Some people know who he is.
I know the name.
He was an old painting Buddha guy.
Okay.
Or at least he was very engaged with that community. And he's kind of, we haven't heard from him in a while. Like we've tried to reach out to him, but anyway. So stayed with him for a good chunk before I went to Europe. I started in Paris. I tried to get a hold of some people in France, but I couldn't really end up getting a hold of anybody in France. But
Right.
I ended up cycling from Paris, France to San Sebastian, Spain.
Oh wow.
So it was like 650-ish miles.
Cycling. Oh my God.
Yeah. It was a bike tour. Yeah. And I wanted to do more, but I had rolled my ankle in England, and I kind of re-agitated it near the tail end of the trip, and so I was like, I'm going to give it a break. And so from there, I ended up in Madrid for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And I didn't really stay with anybody other than Alfonso,
Okay.
or Banshee. He's a very private person, and he was the only reason why that worked out is I had a very good relationship built with him beforehand.
Right.
I don't want people bringing up Alfonso being like, hey man, can I stay?
Right. No.
But anyways, there I got to spend time with Volomir. I don't know if you're familiar with Volomir.
Yeah, Volmir's website. That's a weekly read. You gotta watch that.
Oh man, like he does it. It's still like he's so on top of the community.
Yeah.
But Volomir and Mark Mosclans are two guys that I spent time with. Of course, Alfonso was somebody that I spent time with. Spent a couple days in his studio just hanging out and painting. He was working. He'd come over and be like, "What are you doing, dude?" And I'd be like, I'm doing this, but it's like his studio is like a museum almost.
Right. Oh yeah.
He's got all of his Slayer swords like just in a bin.
Right.
He's
Right.
like, he's such a dedicated painter. I think he enjoys the fact that he earned them, but he's like, yep, there they are.
Right.
Then he'll go back to painting. But
So what's that Roman phrase? We don't masturbate over trophies or something like that.
it's gotta be something. But I got invited to spend a few days at Big Child Creatives.
Oh,
so,
wonderful.
Jose Palomares Lunes and Sergio Calvo Rubio.
Right.
Ruben Martinez was there as well, and of course their whole team of sculptors at the time. And, like they have the whole back of the house guys, and they're really good painters too. Like they're really high level painters too. And here you'd be like, oh, you cast things, and they'd be like, yeah. And it's like you paint, they'll be like, nah, man, this is my day job.
Right.
But like they're like, look at this thing that I painted. Like it's garbage, and you're like, this is not garbage.
This is our mailroom guy. He's only won 2 Slayer swords, so that's why he's in the mailroom.
He's like he won a bronze at Golden Demon a few years ago. He's shit. Like they'd just be kind of like trash talking a little bit.
Sure.
It's
It's fun. Yeah.
So
that's amazing.
Yeah, so
you've named some of my favorite artists.
Yeah.
I am totally infatuated with Mark Mascolin's skin tones.
Oh my god,
He's amazing.
He's just stunning. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there was anybody else in Spain.
I mean,
not that I can
geez.
in particular remember.
Who else would there have to be? You know,
Oh,
I mean,
man,
goodness
there's so
gracious,
many-
that Big
there's so
Child
many
creative
people.
team just itself. You
Yeah.
know?
So there, other than Alfonso, and that
Yeah.
time that I spent with him for a few days. But after that, I went to Barcelona, and I tried to get a hold of Fair, but there was like a scheduling conflict.
Yeah.
He wanted to hang out with me. He was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, man. Like, you know, I'll send you a couple miniatures as an apology." And I was like, "I'm not going to say no." But
Right.
then I did get to meet up with him at a couple of shows throughout
cool.
the year later on.
Very nice.
You know, we got to chat. He was such a nice guy. So there was another guy there. I'm blanking on his name. I didn't stay with him, but he showed me around like the real, you know, Barcelona,
Nice.
where like the Catalan, like where they really live.
Yeah.
Not just like the tourist
Gotcha,
area,
yeah.
right? And so that was nice, getting that kind of behind the scenes, like this is where we live, this is kind of the tempo of life, instead of the crazy hustle and bustle of like near the beach kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, then I went to Italy from there. I actually took a ferry across the Mediterranean.
That had to be cool.
It was very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an adventure. I like rode my bike up onto the ship. It was the same. I had to ride, and then I had to cycle from the port that's near Rome to a train station. Hop on the train to get into Rome. When I essentially through Italy, I wasn't really able to connect with anybody. It just didn't work out. I didn't have a car either, and so like if I had a car, I probably could have hopscotched around a bit more, but I didn't. And so,
But
I still
dude, you're in Italy. Like
Right.
literally,
Yes.
it's art.
Yeah,
like you're
yeah.
like, oh,
it's like it's okay. It's okay that I can't meet up with you. I'll just go look at the old masters. Like,
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
But so yeah, I did a bunch of. I did Rome, Florence, and Venice
Beautiful.
before heading north. And I went up to. I went through Switzerland. Stayed with like. He's a guy who's like the most interesting man in the world. It was like an Airbnb.
Okay.
Not a painter or anything, but he
Right.
thought my journey was super interesting because he was like, yeah, when I retired, I took a plane down to Argentina, bought a Land Rover, and drove to Alaska. And I was like, whoa,
Why?
that's an adventure.
That is an adventure.
And so, yeah, then I went to Konstanz, Germany. I had a high school friend that lived there. We had kept up, you know.
Awesome.
From there, though, is when I went to spend time with Roman.
Okay.
And that's where I spent. I think it ended up being a couple of days. And he was like, "Hey man, I can have you for a couple of days. I have a student coming though for like a one-on-one, you know, workshop over the weekend. So this works out perfectly. You can just kind of crash on my couch, kind of thing." I was like, "Oh, this is perfect." So, and the student actually was Joshua Lai. And so I got to meet. I was there at like the beginning of that relationship because they hadn't really. This
Right.
was like their first time meeting in person. And so yeah, it was kind of cool and I got to meet Joshua. Of course.
That's awesome.
Super, like his growth has been phenomenal. And
Right.
He's again just lovely guy. And from there, I went to the Czech Republic. There's an artist, Thomas Picard. Just super clean. Like he
What
paints
is-
infinity, a lot of infinity and GW stuff.
He has another handle, doesn't he?
I think he does.
I can't think.
I'm
I
blanking
know
on
that
it.
it sounds so familiar,
Yeah.
but I can't think of the handle. But yeah, I think I know who you're talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
But I spent it ended up being like a week and a half-ish in the Czech Republic. Like I kind of threw my hip out.
Oh,
like,
wow.
I don't know what it had. Like my sciatic nerve was just crazy. And I was like, man, I'm going to need to stay here longer because I can hardly move. He was like, he's such a chill guy. He was like, okay.
Right.
And like I'm a decent cook, and so I'd like cook him food.
Right.
And he'd get back and be like, "You made food?" I was like, "Yeah, man. Like, I got to do something for you." So we just kind of paint and eat food and watch Star Trek, and you know,
Sounds awesome.
good times. So, from the Czech Republic, I went to Berlin, and again, this was around the time of when Painting Buddha was like on its death knell, and so I did get to stay with the guy that ran it for like a couple nights.
I can't think of his name. Shoot.
Yeah,
He was always a voiceover for Ben. He was
Right.
always that. I can't think of his name.
I can't remember. He was super into Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
But anyway,
there's definitely 42 references in their videos.
he was. I think he was in general a good intention person, but I think he had some mental health issues that needed to be addressed. And, I wish him all the best.
Absolutely, I hope he's doing okay.
But yeah, so I got to go and spend about a day with Ben. We kind of hung out and got beers a couple times.
Right.
And then also, it's his buddy. Man, he's a Polish guy. He works for CD Projekt Red now. I don't know why I'm blanking on it. But
Polish
anyway.
painters, and I'm not good with locations except for kind of groups. When there's groups of them, you know what I mean.
But, so anyway, I in Berlin it was really just those two, and I love Berlin. Those are great. They were treated me very well. I wanted to go to. I was like, I can either go to Poland or I can go here, but I was getting low on funds, and it was tricky, and so I just ended up flying back to London.
Right.
And I really would have liked to go to Scotland and cycle down to London. But
that would have been
didn't
awesome.
work out either.
Yeah.
So,
actually, I have a former college student that did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they loved every moment of it. They said. Yeah.
Stunning. But yeah, so back there, I spent some time with. He's a miniature painter. He's a decent painter. He's not somebody that you'd be like. He's not like one of the guys that's going to Monte San Salvatore every year, but he very kind. Let me stay at his place for about a month and a half.
Oh wow!
And then I went and stayed with. It seems like it starts with a K. It's the guy that runs. It's not Broken Toad, but they do a lot of stuff together. Kyle, let me see.
Crookshank, Mr.
Kyle
Lee's?
Crookshank, yes.
Mr. Lee's Minis.
Yeah, Mr. Lee's Minis, yeah. I stayed with Kyle Crookshank, his wife and son, for about another month and a half.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, super, super kind guy. They were like kind of in a transition, but he had a very similar experience to me in some ways, where he was like, man, so many people have put me up, like, kind of passing out the generosity.
Right, pay it
and
forward.
I tried to be as helpful as I could around the house. Like I would clean the kitchen every night, or I would cook dinner, so they could just both unwind and just relax. And,
right.
I would babysit for them a little bit. They could kind of go. And, but I mean, they're both very low key people as well, him and his wife. And so that worked out very well. And then at the very end of the whole trip, I went to Monte San Salvatore.
Oh, that's awesome.
And everybody kind of was like aware or monitoring my journey.
Right.
And I wasn't aware of this at all. I was like, man, I'm tired. It was kind of like the end of like Lord of the Rings, where like, it's done. Like, but yeah, I was like, everybody was like, Anthony, and I knew a good fair amount of them that would come to Crystal Brush, like
right.
Francesco and Fabrizio, and a fair amount of the Italian guys, but. Monte San Salvatore for them is very akin to ReaperCon here,
right?
Where it's like a big family reunion. Like they have like a ceremony at the beginning, they have a ceremony at the end, and like you just kind of hang out the whole time, look at all some miniatures. You kind of get food in the town square. And, you just kind of hang out.
Yeah, I've heard it's kind of. It's just literally like you put your miniatures in and you hang out, and then you go to the awards ceremony and it's done, and it's just. But it's like. Literally, it's tons of food, it's tons of drinking and having a good time,
Well, there's a lot of, highbrow conversations about painting and theory and art and all of those good things. But there's also a lot of just like kind of hanging around,
right.
Shooting the shit, not really being too serious about life. And,
that's a bucket list show for me.
If you're a miniature painter, like that's your passion, then Monte San Salvatore should be a bucket list thing.
I've heard you could spend a day alone in the gallery, in the submissions.
For sure. There's so many. The way that they do it too is they delineate, like ReaperCon, and I don't mean this as a comparison or in a negative way or anything, or criticism. So they have like a standard category. That'd be like how we look at ReaperCon, right?
Right.
Where you have, it's open. There's bronze, silver, gold. They have, they have criteria, and they'll judge kind of according. And then they have masters. So there is a delineation between the two.
Right.
In masters is like if you scored something in standard, especially if you scored a gold in standard. Like if you scored a gold or silver in standard, you need to look at masters now,
Right.
because you're progressing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into masters, the criteria is like very, very challenging, right?
Right.
And usually, at least when I was there, it seemed like at least half of the people that entered masters went home with nothing. Usually even in masters, they were like, the judgments are so fair, they're like, yep, I didn't earn it.
Yeah.
Or like if they got a bronze, they're like over the moon.
Right.
Because for their community, that's like an indication that like, oh yeah, you are a master now.
Right. Well, it's like the Olympics almost.
Yeah,
like, like you see people like, oh, they didn't win the gold, but they're dancing because they got a bronze.
Right. And I do think that something like ReaperCon would benefit from that. At least for like, if you won a couple of golds at ReaperCon, like, it's a very good indication that like you're good.
Right.
You're painting at a high level. And it's, the transition goes from encouragement to how high can we raise the bar in the American community. But anyway, personal opinion.
No,
I think
everything
it would be
is
healthy.
different. Yeah, I mean, all the competitions are different. They're
Of course, it's not coming from like a cynical place either.
Right.
It's in good faith for sure. But yeah. So anyway, that was the whole. And then after that, it was like a mad scramble to get back to London. Then in London, I just like slept at the terminal. Like I got my tickets, and when you get your tickets, you can sleep in the terminal.
Oh wow!
Like I slept in the terminal for like 3 nights.
Oh wow!
Before my flight home. And I think when I got back to New York, I went to New York, had a couple days, Missouri, where I live, and by the time I got back, I had like $5 in my account. I could hardly afford a bagel in New York.
Wow.
And so I was.
Hey, but
I was
what?
shoestringing it. Like it was worth it though.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now looking back at it, it's hard to in the time, but looking back at it now, you're like, it was worth every penny, all the struggle and everything like that. So that is absolutely.
It was
amazing.
definitely. It was a test. I think it was in some ways like a test of endurance, and I've always enjoyed that aspect of like how far can I push myself? Like what is my limitation? And when you do something super challenging, and you're like, oh man, I'm still here, and like. It didn't break me, and I feel excited about what's next. Like, I feel like that's a good or a healthy thing, and I try to find that in life when I can.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So one of the big things for our podcast is our motto is better, braver, happier. And what I love to ask our artists, is there some advice you can give to our listeners about as they continue their hobby journeys?
Yeah. So... It's a great question. It's a challenging question. I think that there's a couple of things personally, and I can get into some detail. I think on a general level, I would say be brave and try new things. And if they fail, don't beat yourself up or be down. Be excited because you just learned something new. And that's like that's a lot of what they do in fine art is like they're able to iterate really, really fast. And I think that's a part of why in the miniatures community the failures feel harder. So yeah, it's okay. You have more time, like you have more miniatures. I'm sure you have more miniatures, right? And yeah, keep pushing. And if you're the other thing too is like. If you're in that realm of learning, you'll always be learning. There's like this area where like you're pushing. Like every miniature is a new idea almost. If you're not doing something that almost makes you uncomfortable a little bit, you may not be pushing yourself and you may not be learning as much. Because while comfort is great, like Bilbo didn't go on that whole adventure by staying in his hobbit hole. Like, he had to leave the hobbit hole. Do a lot of things that made him very uncomfortable to become who he was. And I think that the same thing kind of applies with life and with miniature painting. And of course there's gradients of that. I think that within art, generally it can be fairly safe. But look, the third bit that I'll say is if you are wanting to improve your painting, is start to learn from sci-fi and fantasy illustrators, because the techniques that they teach and the iteration that those techniques allow will help you progress very quickly. The best thing that I ever did, and I know the guy has had like issues, but the best thing I ever did was study under Noah Bradley, who's an illustrator, and kind of, I didn't have to master drawing or sketching, but it taught me the skill of doing studies.
Right.
And so I could do studies in Photoshop.
Oh, that's
and I could learn a ton by doing like, I think once, at least minimum for a year, once a day I was doing a master study.
Oh, that's
of either like a fine artist or a miniature artist. And that helped me so substantially. And when I ran it by the other miniature guys, they were like, this is the path to success. And so that's probably the most like niche thing, right?
Sure. But I'm reading Gurney's Light and Shadow book.
Gurney's fantastic.
Yeah, that's actually I did not bring it with me. I'm pissed because I left it on my. I was like when I've had some downtime, but yeah, I've started into that, and the first picture that's in there, I'm like, okay, that gave me an idea for a diorama with Stormcast Eternals. Yeah. And so I've already like got it sketched out. It's amazing how quickly.
You're so spot on. And I think that what it does is it takes your mind away from. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of scale miniatures, there's a lot of emphasis on like, we're going to learn a bunch of tips and tricks. And that's great because miniature painting can be so technical, but at a certain point, you have no choice but to start to repeat those tips and tricks.
Right.
And it has to advance somewhere. And that somewhere that it advances is observing, practicing, and learning how light functions and how shapes function and how like environment functions and like kind of the interactions between light. And that's how you get all those different environments in Gurney, and what his explanations are is like, this is a cloudy day. Everything's very diffused right now. There's not as much color. And so now you know that like if you paint everything super smooth and everything very evenly, it's going to look like a gray cloudy day. But you know if it's going to be a sunny blue sky day, more pop of color, more warmth on the bright side, and all your shadows are going to have cool because that blue sky is filling in all those shadow spaces. Right? It's shifting everything towards coolness.
That makes sense.
And so, like it's like those kind of little microcosms of lessons that you get much more from the fine art world because the emphasis is on creating feeling of light and not necessarily tips and tricks.
You just explained something so succinctly that so many people try to explain with the warmth of the highlight and the shadows are filled in by the blue sky. And I've never heard anybody phrase it that way. That is amazing.
Oh man.
That is like, if you want to talk about, what is it? What do they call them? The hot tips, or pro tip. That is the pro tip of the year for sure. That is not Gurney doesn't explain it that well. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and to be honest, the only reason that I learned it that well is from an artist called Marco Bucci.
Okay.
And even he, it was very complicated. I had to distill it even from that. But yeah, that trick is amazing. And when you study it in real life, you can't unsee it. Like when I really learned that, it was probably one of two moments where I was high on color.
Right.
For like a week and a half. I was like, I can't unsee. This is everywhere. Like, I was like delirious.
Right. That's
Deb
Sodegar and I were talking about it earlier. So once you get into the artistic side of miniature painting, you can't look at things the same way.
You can't. And it helps you, like, one thing that I do love about painting and art is that it helps you appreciate the world around you so much more. And it helps you zero in on details and character, story.
Right.
I love documentaries for that very reason. Like, but yeah. Anyways, I'm getting into like lofty, kind of.
You're fine, man.
But yeah, the look for it. Look for it outside.
Yeah.
In when you're looking at shadows on a blue, like cloudless day, keep in your mind that the shadows are bluer. And what you'll start to see is like you have very yellow grass, and you have very like green-blue grass.
Right.
And like if you have something that's gray, like cement, it'll start feeling blue. If you have something that's yellow, I was on a bike ride once and I saw a horse,
Mm-hmm.
and in the sunlight, golden.
Oh wow!
Just
Yeah.
golden for on the shadow side, gray.
That's interesting. Yeah. Never
Because
thought
the colors cancel each other out.
right.
And so, but the only way that I would be able to observe that, but maybe not appreciate or recreate it
Mm-hmm.
as succinctly if I did understand why the lighting was functioning that way.
Right. Or even process what you're
Yeah,
looking at.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
really great. Man, we are definitely going to do follow-ups because this has been awesome. Thank you so much, man. So can you tell our listeners where to find you?
Yes, yeah. You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Pirate Monkey Painting. I have a YouTube channel called Pirate Monkey Basics, and I do have a Patreon that I'm going to start filling in with more content. I've got a bit of content that I need to catch up on for it. Hopefully I may start streaming again, maybe a couple times a month. I need to kind of get it set up and schedule it and everything. But it's the same on Twitch. It's Pirate Monkey Painting. And also, I mean, to your viewers, it's an open invitation if you want to reach out to me. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to communicate about some of these things. I'm called Pirate Monkey Painting because to some extent, like, I don't think that there should be a big. We shouldn't gatekeep information super stringently. There's definitely a realm where, like, hey, like, my time is valuable. If you really want one-on-one interaction, then yeah, I have to charge you. But there's other things where it's like, yeah, let's have a conversation about this.
And I think people understand that artists have to put food on the table too.
Yeah.
And they got to rent the space that they live in. So
For sure.
yeah, there's no. I learned a valuable lesson about artists undervaluing themselves this weekend myself. So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely we appreciate anything that you do and the work that you put out. You're a fantastic artist and an amazing guest, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
you're
really appreciate
very
it.
kind, man. I appreciate it, and I try to pay it back as much as I can. And a part of that is like giving back information, because I had so much information just like gifted to me.
Right.
And so yeah, I want to pass on that gift as honestly and humbly as I can.
You're amazing at it, man. Thank you.
Dan and I would like to thank Anthony for joining us today. We really appreciated hearing about his hobby journey. He was a fantastic guest. He is a super talented artist and teacher and all-around nice guy. You can follow him on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Patreon at Pirate Monkey Painting. Please head on over to his stuff and give him a like, a subscribe, or a follow. You could also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Listening to Paint Dry. We are on Twitter at Dry Listening. We'd love to hear from you, so drop us a line at listeningtopaintdry@gmail.com. You can also like, subscribe, or follow wherever you get your podcasts from. If you could leave us a positive review, we would be super appreciative of it. And the way we get more knowledge of the show is getting the word out. So anybody that's spread the word about us, thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of our listeners out there. Be excited about your failures. They will only help you become a better, braver, happier painter. Until next time. Listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan is a production of LTPTWMD. All rights reserved. No portion of this recording may be used without the express written consent of the host. The music is Death by a Thousand Questions by Springtide. Download from the Free Music Archive on a non-commercial attribution share-alike basis. All views and opinions expressed in the show are solely the views and opinions of the person who said them. All celebrity voices, if any, were impersonated and done so poorly.